Hello there, bookish besties. Welcome back to the channel. Ooh, that sounded kind of cool, the channel. I kind of like that. Anyway, hi, I am Ashley. If this is the first time seeing my page or one of my videos, hello, welcome. You have found the cool place, the fun place, insert a fun adjective here, place. Today, we are continuing in my Hunger Games deep dive, full analysis discussion, and this time we are talking about Mockingjay, which is the third book in the Hunger Games trilogy, but don't you worry, there are still 2 more books to go, the prequels, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and Sunrise on the Reaping that is released this year, baby. So go ahead, get all comfy cozy. I'm in my fun little jumper. I have a nice cozy blanket and my non-sponsored drink, but seriously, I'm open. Just call me, let me know. Actually, really needed that. Wow. And we are gonna go ahead and get started. So, as a heads up, this video is about to contain so many spoilers for the entire Hunger Games trilogy and Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. So, strap on in and let's get going. If you haven't made it this far in the Hunger Games series yet with the books, go start back at my first video with Hunger Games and read the books, watch the movies. Y'all know the thing. I don't think you'd be watching this video if you're not a huge Hunger Games fanatic like yours truly. A quick little tidbit fun story about Mockingjay is that this book came out when I was in 8th grade. You guys can do the math. I will not do the math. That's not my forte. But when this book came out, my mom and I had gone to Barnes & Noble the day before, gotten the book, as one does, and I went home, and then the next day I was so sick. My mom was feeling my temperature, and she's like, oh yeah, you feel really hot. And she let me stay home for the day. And you know what I did? I read Mockingjay cover to cover. She came home and I was in the epilogue and just sobbing my little, 13, 12-year-old eyes out. It was amazing. And to this day, she knows that I fake my sickness and she let me skip school to read Mockingjay. She knew exactly what I was doing. But I could have been skipping school to do literally anything else. Mockingjay is this really powerful and intense and honestly perfect conclusion to the original Hunger Games trilogy. This story is a lot more darker than the previous books, which I don't think I picked up on in my first initial reads of it, but man, did it hit me again when I read it in my late 20s. The stakes are higher than ever with the fight against the Capitol, and Katniss really finds herself in the center of all the action. This book explores the real costs of war and not just the physical parts of the action. We really dive into the emotional toll, not just on Katniss, but on other tributes and other friends going into this war, as well as this really blurred and gray line between good and evil. Katniss's journey this time is really internal, as we get to see her inner monologue and see her struggle with loss and trauma, all while juggling the responsibilities of this war. The action, of course, is still there, but the story itself focuses a lot more on strategy, politics, and the power of propaganda. This book is such a thought-provoking and very, very emotional read, and I think such a necessary and fitting conclusion to such a great series. Without further ado, let's dive on in. You have hit your spoiler warning. This is your warning. So let's dive into this deep dive. Dive into a deep dive. Anyway, we're gonna dive into our deep dive of Mockingjay, and I'm gonna bring up some points that you might have missed in your initial read of this book. But before we start, can we just talk about Katniss's inner monologue and how unhinged she really becomes throughout this book, and how that really makes her an unreliable narrator. And I love it. I love seeing the gray parts of Katniss as she's going through this trauma and she's trying to heal, but she's not in a place to heal, and how it's affecting her thinking and her abilities and her judgment as well. It's just, oh, it's so good. Let's start. So as we know, after the destruction of 12, Katniss is taken to District 13. The revolution is in full swing, and Katniss is at the front of it all. She is the Mockingjay. She is the face of this rebellion. The book opens with Katniss exploring the ruins of District 12. This opening really sets the tone for the devastation and destruction that she's going to continue to face throughout the book. We're also introduced to Cardew and Plutarch Heavensbee. These are two key players in the rebellion, and they're both essentially refugees from the capital. Plutarch, we know, is the former head game maker, and Cardew is a new name that we haven't met before. Or have we? In Ballad of Songbird and Snakes. We've met the family before, at least, for both Cardew and Heavensbee. Katniss is mentally shattered, or, according to District 13's little wristband, mentally disordered. She's for sure suffering from PTSD and an overwhelming stress. And these pressures of being the Mockingjay, all of these, of course, influence her decision-making and her judgment. Despite being the heart of the rebellion, we see District 13 be really rigid and controlling, much like the Capitol is. They have incredibly strict schedules and incredibly strict punishments for seemingly innocent crimes like stealing a loaf of bread. I mean, come on. It basically is the French and this is Les Mis, and Katniss is Jean Valjean stealing a loaf of bread in order to survive. We see President Coin really reluctantly make this deal with Katniss so Katniss can become the Mockingjay, but in return, Katniss has this list of demands. Demands including she gets to hunt out with Gale, she gets to keep her cat, and of course, we're going to rescue all of the tributes that were taken, not just tributes, the victors that were taken by the Capitol, including Peeta, Joanna, and Annie. And of course, when we get those victors back, they're going to be pardoned of any crimes against them. I think the smartest thing that Katniss could have done with this list of demands is to make her tell them in front of all of District 13 to hold her accountable. That was such a smart player move, something I didn't catch on my very first read, but I caught again later with my fully developed mind, if you will. Because of course, like in the room where it happened, you have to have those witnesses or, you know, the contract signed, whatever, but witnesses mainly in order to make sure that whoever's in power and in control actually follows through with what they said they were going to do. It's in chapter 5 that Katniss realizes that she is another pawn in someone else's game. Just this time, she's the pawn in the Rebels game. There is a moment that I really loved in chapter 5 as well, and it's the moment when Katniss realizes that she has to become the Mockingjay. She's having essentially a mental breakdown in a closet. She has a lot of these throughout Mockingjay, and like, girl, I relate, not to that level, dear goodness, not to that level, but I relate. And when she's having this realization, she knocks over a thing of pencils. And it's really, really subtle, but I just think it's such a great connection to District 13 because they're known publicly for graphite. Like, that's what they mine is graphite. They don't necessarily know that they're the nuclear powerhouse, essentially, because all the districts know them as mining graphite. And here Katniss is knocking over pencils made of graphite. Anyway, very, very subtle little nod. So in order to be the Mockingjay, Katniss needs, of course, her prep team. She has to look the part, because normal Katniss, does not look the part. Plutarch and Katniss and Gale travel down to go find the prep team, and when they finally are able to not just convince, but plow their way through the guard, they find the prep team locked, essentially in jail. They are dishriveled, they are beaten, they are covered in their own feces. It smells like urine. Like, they have not been kept great at all. They are mistreated, and it really, I think it showcases District 13 for what it is. They saw the prep team as capital. So they are going to punish capital, even if every single person on that prep team is innocent. And we've seen Katniss's relationship with her prep team evolve throughout the book. And she kind of sees them as innocent little lost puppy dogs that she has to take care of because they don't know any better. It's not their fault Katniss is going into the game. It's not their fault that the only thing they have to talk about is the drama on TV because they've never known a life without struggle. They've never had to not survive, you know? Or they never had to worry about survival, more so. And Katniss just sees District 13 treating them terribly is heartbreaking, and it shows District 13 for who they really are. And you know what the prep team did to deserve this? steal a loaf of bread. It all comes back to Jean Valjean. Katniss eventually stars in these propagandas, or propos, as Plutarch loves to call them. Katniss goes to District 8, she visits the hospital, she gives them all hope, and then they're pretty much immediately bombed by the Capitol, and we have this great organic moment of, if we burn, you burn with us, which, oh, so powerful. And it's, again, Katniss in the moment, as we also learn in Mockingjay. Katniss cannot act. She is not an actor. She has to be in the moment. She has to be impromptu. She cannot be coached. She cannot be controlled. You have to let Katniss be. And that's an ongoing theme, not just in Hunger Games, but throughout the entire 3 books. But eventually, we're able to get the Capitol to see those propos, and they, in turn, make one of Peeta. Peeta calls for a ceasefire and hopes to slow down or stop this rebellion. And of course, it doesn't happen. Gale is ironically the first one to notice that Peeta is still fighting to protect Katniss. Otherwise, he would have pointed fingers at Katniss and said, it's all your fault, but he didn't do that. These games of manipulation and strategy still aren't over on either side. And one of my favorite subtle little moments is, again, anytime we see Peeta's pearl. I mentioned in my Catching Fire video that pearl was going to be very, very important in Mockingjay, and here we are. Because that pearl symbolizes all of Peeta's goodness and innocence, and just Peeta in general. And Katniss has very, very few possessions. She has like a photo of her dad, she has the locket that Peeta gives her, and she has the pearl that's wrapped in the parachute. Like, it's crazy how that's basically how much she owns. And there's a moment when she takes the pearl out after she filmed the propo in 8, and she's rubbing the pearl against her lips as if, quote, a smooth kiss from the giver himself. So Miss Katniss, she's trying to picture herself kissing Peeta. Anyway, Team Peeta. Hee hee. So that was part 1, the Ashes. Now we are in part 2, the Assault. Essentially, in the Assault, the rebels have begun their coordinated attacks on the Capitol, and Katniss continues to serve as the Mockingjay, even though her emotional state continues to deteriorate. But she's not the only one. Despite Finnick's charm, his emotional state is also something of my very deep concern. There are moments where he's not 100% mentally where he is. For example, the time when he's running around in his underwear and Katniss and the team are all about to go to 8 to film that propo, and he's like, wait a minute, I have to go, I have to be there. And Katniss has to create an excuse for why he can't go, besides the fact that he's running around in his underwear. So there's moments of glimpses and moments of Finnick's real inner turmoil coming to the scene, and we see it through Katniss's eyes. And I wish we dove a little bit more into that in this book. And I wish the movie showed a little bit more of that, but that is a completely different topic. I have a video coming out that's going to cover exactly that. So stay tuned. It's also really interesting to note that District 2 Masonry is not only where they make all the weapons, but it's also where Peacekeeper training is. We also learned this from Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. But it's also interesting that not all Peacekeepers are Capital or from 2. A lot of them are from 2. But Peacekeepers are District. I think that's really interesting to note in the fight for the Capitol, that when they're fighting Peacekeepers, they're fighting themselves and they're fighting the districts. Just the district people who've aligned themselves with the Capitol because the Capitol has provided what for them? Safety, security, food, a job, a roof over their head, and money, I suppose. Plutarch shares his vision of building a democracy out of the ashes of Panem. This adds a nice little layer of philosophy to the rebellion. He shares his plan with Coin. Now the question is, does she have the same dreams and ideals that Plutarch has? I guess we'll find out. While filming a propo in District 12, essentially showing the ruins and what the Capitol has done, the filming team takes a break and they notice mockingjays. Katniss sings a song that her father taught her, but her mother had forbidden it in the house when she first heard Katniss sing it. And that song is The Hanging Tree. When Katniss goes to sing a song, all of the mockingjays fall silent, which, one, is a nod to Peeta's earlier observation in Book 1. 2, it's a very similar thing and skill that her dad had, because she mentioned that her dad would sing and all the birds would stop singing, would fall quiet. And 3 supports the theory that Katniss and her family are descended from the Covey, specifically Maud Ivory, because Maud Ivory, as we know, has that ability to memorize a line and all the birds stop singing when she sings. And Katniss also mentions, I don't know if I said this, that she has this talent where she can hear a song a couple of times and have it absolutely memorized. And by a couple, it's literally like 1 or 2, which is the exact same skill that Maud Ivory has. And now it's time to rescue Peeta. District 13 takes a chance to go rescue the remaining victors from the Capitol and to do anything to help Katniss and Finnick both take to the Propos. Katniss shares her story of the boy with the bread for the very first time to the public, which is very, very sweet, but all the attention goes to Finnick. Because what does Finnick trade in? He doesn't use money. He trades his services, which we now know is prostitution, because Snow was prostituting him at such a young age, and currently to this day. He doesn't deal in money, he deals in secrets. So he was spilling all the secrets, and he saved President Snow's for last to ensure that every eye, including Snow's, would be on Finnick. And it worked. The team were able to sneak in, get the victors out, and get them back to District 13. Yay, everyone's happy and everyone's home, right? A couple side notes here before we talk about the happy homecomings is 1, Katniss's inner monologue is absolutely insane when she realizes that Finnick had been sold essentially for his body, because she's had such a bad judgment about him up until this point, and now she realizes that everything that she knows about Finnick is wrong. Finnick also reveals a very, very specific detail that Snow's weapon of choice is poison, and how he poisons essentially anyone in his way, whether it be an ally or his enemy, to get to the top and get what he wants. And that's why he always reeks of blood, is because he'll poison his glass too, and he has mouth sores that he can never heal, so he has the very, very perfumed roses to cover up the smell. And what is poison if not the perfect weapon for a snake? So back to the happy homecoming, except it's not, because Peeta has been hijacked. In their very happy welcoming back, Peeta extends his arms out towards Katniss, only to clasp around her neck and choke her. After this revelation, Katniss needs out of District 13. She's like, I can't be here. I can't watch Peeta suffer like this. I can't watch him hate me, because he's been hijacked. Essentially, all of his memories of Katniss have been replaced with bad ones, fearful ones, where whenever he sees her, thinks of her, hears her, he is automatically triggered into a fight in his fight or flight, and it's to kill. She is a weapon of the Capitol. Katniss is the evil one, the bad one, and he has all of these misconstrued memories of Katniss that he now has to work through and, resolve from his own PTSD trauma. So Katniss hightails it out of there. She goes District 2. She says, get me out of here, I'm gonna go train. She trains for like 2 weeks in District 2, and their goal is to take the Nut. The Nut is the mountain that homes all of the weaponry of District 2. After they blow up the Nut, Katniss is waiting for the surrenders to come out of the train tunnel. She is convincing them, why are you fighting the rebels? We're your neighbors. And she gets shot in the chest. But of course, she's fine. She's fine. Her vest is bulletproof. Of course it would be. And she's back at 13 recovering. And while she's recovering, who is her roommate but Joanna? And a great callback to Catching Fire when Katniss mentions that, I wonder if Joanna is what it's like having a big sister that hates you. We really get to see that relationship blossom and bloom while they are roommates. And I say relationship very, very much like a sister who hates you. Like, you can't help but love them and tolerate them, and you have your moments of happiness, but then it's like back to just like tolerating. But I love seeing the relationship grow during this time and they were roommates. Being able to see Joanna through Katniss's eyes as roommates, we get to know a lot more about Joanna. We get to know a lot more about her own struggles, her own trauma, and her own past. We learn that Joanna has nothing left of her previous life, nothing left to remind her of her home in District 7. So when Joanna finds herself injured one day, Katniss goes and creates a little bundle And the bundle is filled with pine cones and grass and tree bark and apples and things to remind her of her district. And she brings it to her in the hospital, just like, here you go. But she got injured because Katniss and her were training, because they were training to go to the capital. They wanted to fight on the front lines and be there to essentially assassinate Snow and get their revenge. And I think it's so interesting the way that Joanna gets injured. And I want to know more, but this is just the very, very little bit glimpse that we get from, again, Katniss's point of view. They are doing training in fake capital streets, and essentially what they are trying to prove, they being Coin in District 13, and they are trying to exploit the weakness to see if this person's going to fall victim to their weakness or overpower it to be part of this cohesive unit. For example, Katniss sees an opportunity to be the hero, to break out of the pack, out of the squad, in order to save somebody and also kill the enemy. She realizes that, Coin realizes that her biggest weakness is the ability to not follow directions, which I think is so telling, by the way. But Katniss is smart enough, thank God, to realize it and stays put, so she's good. She's cleared. She's good to go. There's a moment in Joanna's test where she is essentially filled in a pond of water. Like, water is really like flooding the streets and she's like drowning in it. And it takes her back to when she was tormented, I'm gonna use that word, tortured, if you will, by the Capitol, because they used water to torture her. So the moment that she got resubmerged in water, it all came back. And that's why she's in the hospital. So checking in on Peeta, his progress is not doing well of the hijacking. And it's probably the most heartbreaking part of this book, is knowing that the Peeta that we got in Hunger Games and Catching Fire is essentially no more. He's gone. He is erased with this new mutt version. And even if he could potentially get back, it's not going to be the same as he was before. And one of the most heartbreaking scenes is the very casual lunch scene, where everyone is just sitting at the lunch table. You've got Katniss, Gale, Finnick, Annie, Joanna, and Deli Cartwright, their friend from District 12, who is Peeta's friend as well, helping him recover. Peeta comes in and they have to invite him to sit, so he sits down. And he has moments where he's himself. He has moments where he is complimenting people, being genuine again, because Finnick and Annie got married. Fun fact, Finnick and Annie get married. I don't think I skipped over that one, but they did.
Well, hello there. This is future Ashley tuning in from editing, because I did not talk about the wedding scene enough and you guys need to know about it. So in the book, there's a note about the wedding scene where the only people dancing at the wedding to a lone fiddler player, mind you, that is a little callback, if you will, or call forward. The only people dancing were the people from District 12. Somehow, someway, District 12 was able to keep their culture, keep their songs, keep their dancing, keep their music, in despite of everything. And they were able to do it more than any other district. District 13 doesn't have any kind of culture, really. They're so focused on survival, but somehow District 12 was able to keep those key parts of themselves to the point that they're literally dancing at a wedding, and there are dances that everyone knows and they've all learned because they're the district that's been able to hold on to the roots of themselves the most. Anyway, that and the lone little fiddler player playing those little fiddle songs. And the entire thing was broadcasted live by Plutarch, of course, our entertainment genius, for the Capitol and specifically for Snow. So all I'm imagining is President Snow watching Finnick and Annie get married in all of District 12, dancing to the Covey songs, to the songs that Lucy Gray used to sing directly to him. Wow, talk about haunting a narrative. All right, let's keep going.
And they talk about how Peeta designed the cake and he decorated the cake, and he has a moment where he's himself again and he's just like, oh, your wedding was beautiful. It was amazing. And Katniss is like, oh, there he is. There he is. But then when Finnick and Annie get up to go take a walk, Peeta has this weird moment where he's like, be careful, Finnick. I might take your girl from you. Which was said in a very, very cold voice. And it also is just shattering to know that he's one, I guess, like attempting to flirt with Annie. He's threatening Finnick to steal his girl who literally he just got married to. And it's completely disregarding the fact that Katniss, his ex-fiance, is sitting right there. It's just really hard. So Katniss gets up and leave, and apparently Deli just takes it out at him, and she just yells at him about how he could be so mean. And again, I wish we saw that. I would have loved to see angsty Peeta get put in his place. Now that the rebels have captured District 2, they are able to put their front and their eyes towards invading the capital. Katniss will do anything to go. She's been training with Joanna for weeks. It's funny because they actually got put in like the children's training classes with like 13-year-olds when they're like, we literally went into Hunger Games twice. We can survive this. What do you mean we're with 12-year-olds who are doing better than us? Anyway, very entertaining. And Katniss goes to the front line. She is in Squad 451, which is later nicknamed the Star Squad. Her squad mates include people that we know and love, like Finnick, Gale, and some other soldiers, like Boggs, Mitchell, the twins, and Jackson. Also with her directorial team, like Cressida. And you wonder why her directorial team and Cressida are there, and it's because they are the Star Squad. They are the face of the rebellion. They are the on-screen entertainment. So they will be on the outskirts of the Capitol shooting propos. And oh, did I mention that the Capitol is also live broadcasting everything? Welcome to the 76th Hunger Games, my friends. Peeta actually later joins the Star Squad as well. And here we see Coin's true intentions come out. Because the one thing that Katniss can do to further add fire to this rebellion is truly to die. Peeta is sent there almost as a spark for her not to make it, is how I'm going to phrase that. And this adds another level to Katniss's survival now in the Capitol, where there's pods everywhere that's meant to kill them. And a conversation that she had with Boggs kind of comes to mind as well during this whole time, because Boggs makes a point that Katniss, again, cannot be controlled. And their hope is to have a free election, and Coin wants to be president. That's no shocker there. And Katniss is essentially Alexander Hamilton. Everyone's looking to Katniss on who to vote for, and her influence could really sway the election. And if Katniss's first instinct isn't to vote for Coin, she is a threat. When Peeta joins the Star Squad, he is handcuffed. And there's a really symbolic moment here with, remember, the pearl, because Katniss is given the handcuff keys. So she has the keys to Peeta's handcuffs, and she puts them in her pocket. And she hears the handcuff keys dangling and colliding with the pearl. You have the pearl that is Peeta's innocence, the love that Peeta has for Katniss, jiggling next to, I like that, jiggling, next to the keys that is holding the monster, the mutt of Peeta, at bay. It's so symbolic. So while the Star Squad is, gallivanting around the Capitol, doing their propos, because they're here for quite a bit, Peeta starts getting really upset about the memories that he can't necessarily remember or if he could tell is real. Finnick brings up this essential game that him and Annie play, which is titled Real or Not Real. Anytime that there's a memory that he's not quite sure if it's real, he can ask his squad, and they can confirm or deny if it's real or not real. And this is the first time we really see that in action. And there's a parallel moment here after the introduction of the Real or Not Real game, where Katniss is inspecting the wounds on his wrists, and she's telling him, like, you're gonna be fine. And Peeta pulls out this little number. Katniss, I know what blood poisoning looks like, even if my mother wasn't a healer. You said that to me in the games, real or not real. Direct quote from book 1, direct quote from the games. And it's so, I guess, jarring to see how far these characters have come in just book 1 to book 3 to bring that line back verbatim. It really takes Katniss by surprise, but it also is like a little small light because the real Peeta is still in there. He's still in there. He still knows. It's just going to take a lot of weebing and webbing to get him out. All right, we're into part 3, the assassin. The Star Squad is taking a bunch of hits as they are making their way through the Capitol, and this is just honestly the hardest part of the book to get through. And Katniss becomes more and more determined to kill Snow herself. So one by one, we start to lose squad members. From Boggs, who then gives essentially entire control over to Katniss, to Mitchell and Jackson, the twins. Peeta has a full come apart when he realizes that he is the reason that Mitchell has died. And there's a very small glimpse into Peeta, his old self, when that happens. He sees himself turned mutt, and he's able to kind of separate the two of, oh, I am a danger to this squad. And when he speaks about, the danger that he can cause, he's fully in control and fully himself again, but he can't control that 100% of the time. And then we have the most heartbreaking loss, which I still don't like to talk about, which is sweet baby daddy, literally baby daddy Finnick. Rumor has it, I've seen confirmations, I've seen denials, but I like to believe this is true. Rumor has it that Suzanne Collins herself has stated that she openly regrets killing Finnick. And she said that's the biggest regret death in the books. Don't come for me if it's not true, but I really cling to it and I hope that it is. Otherwise, I don't know if I could go on. And the only way I will ever forgive her for this is if she gives us a prequel story like she does Snow and like she does Haymitch. That's the only way I will ever forgive you, Susie C. And I guess there are some happier moments, if you can call them that. Some little dandelions. Ooh, little dandelions. And these really heartbreaking, gut-wrenching moments for us Peeta lovers out there, because he's still there. He's still there inside of him. And he has moments where he's fully in control and he's, talking about Katniss. And he's like, you still have no idea the effect that you can have. And Peeta is still the only one that can break through to Katniss. And we have those moments where they're playing real or not real, and Peeta's like, your favorite color is green. Because he remembers Katniss's favorite color, but he doesn't remember it himself. And Katniss is like, yes, yours is orange. And he's like, orange? And she's like, yes, orange, but not a bright orange like the sunset. And then goes off to tell him all these tiny little details about himself that, I'm sorry, only someone who knows you very, very intimately and potentially loves you could know. Like the fact that you always take sugar in your tea, you always sleep with the windows open, you always double knot your shoelaces. Those are very subtle things that only a person that's spent so much time with you and knows you so intimately would know. Anyway, high horse, I'm off of it. We'll keep going. There is also a weird moment, I think it's weird at least, I don't know, where Katniss is sleeping but wakes up and overhears a conversation between Gale and Peeta talking literally about her as she's in the room right there. And I'm like, Gale, can you not bring this up right now in the middle of a war when she's really emotionally traumatized? Thank you so much. But he does mention that in the end, Katniss is going to choose the one that she can't survive without. Which is true, very much so. And we know that it's Peeta at this point. We know it's Peeta. She hasn't been able to survive with him for 2 books already. She's done perfectly fine without you, Gale. Thank you so much. The door is right there. And then we get to that final chaotic attack, I should say, near Snow's mansion. So they have made their way through the Capitol. Pretty much 3/4 of their squad have not made it. And they are reaching the front gates and they're all in disguises. Gale it's just a chaotic mess. And the kids of the Capitol are being brought to the Capitol's front gates. And all of a sudden, parachutes come down from what we can only assume Capitol hovercrafts, and bombs go off. Katniss is nearby, and it's her gut instinct to go help the helpless, as it is a bunch of people in the Capitol, so everyone starts rushing towards them, including medics. Katniss looks, and she sees a little ducktail, and it's Prim. And that is the moment that brings it all back together. The biggest callback from the first Hunger Games, where Katniss was in a trance until she saw Prim's ducktail at the reaping, to jump into action to realize Prim is being reaped, but now it's Prim is in that area of bombs where that just happened. She's with other District 13 medics, and then a second round of bombs go off. And Katniss gets hit. Katniss gets really severely burned. And it's another callback to Katniss being the girl on fire, but this time she's literally on fire. But before we move forward, let's break down those bombs just a little bit. So these bombs are Gale's initial plans truly come to life. Gale hatched this plan, this idea of what these bombs could be back in the beginning of this book. He was taking the initiative off of traps that he'd set for animals, and he's working off of just human nature of compassion to help. So the idea was the first initial bomb went off. You'd get a crowd of people to rush in to go help the wounded, and then the second round of bombs would go off to really just get the most ultimate damage. Katniss, when Gale first told her these plans, was just, well, I guess there's, no more laws about what people can do to each other, because she realized that Gale has no compassion for any human beings. Like, that's how intense his level of revenge on the Capitol is. But Katniss sees the good. She sees the compassion, and she sees that there are some people who are complicit in the Capitol's actions and some people who are completely innocent, and believes that the innocent people shouldn't have to suffer for the Capitol's wrongdoing, right? Gale doesn't see that. It's very, very black and white. He does not see that gray that Katniss does. So these bombs, while not officially sanctioned by Gale did not say, all right, check mark, go do these bombs. That was Coin. We'll get into it. It was Gale's idea, and these bombs wouldn't have happened if Gale never came up with the idea. And that's really why Katniss could never forgive Gale for that. But let's not keep Coin out of this, because Coin gave the approval to launch these bombs. She also gave the approval of a 13, maybe 14-year-old girl, Katniss's sister, to be a medic on the front lines of this war. My theory is that Coin made sure Primrose was in that when that bomb was going to go off. That was no mistake on Coin's part, and she wanted to do that to further be able to control Katniss. But now the Capitol has fallen, and Katniss realizes that this bomb has been a tactic that Coin used to turn the side of the war, and obviously it works. And then we get to Katniss's ultimate act of rebellion. Here's when Coin truly reveals herself as this foil to Snow. They are two sides of the same coin. It's right there in the name. It's literally right there in the name. Suzanne literally was just like, oh, you want to know who she is? Like, it's there in the name. I'm just gonna tell you that flat out. Both Coin and Snow are power hungry, obsessed over the idea of control. They're willing to take it whatever means necessary, and they're not afraid to hurt whoever might be in their path. They also both can't stand Katniss for the exact same reason, that she cannot be controlled. An interesting little side note is that during these last few days of the war, when Katniss is just like roaming the halls blankly, she keeps getting reminded of the lyrics of The Hanging Tree. When it comes time for Snow's execution, Katniss is like all in. All the remaining victors meet up, and Coin proposes this plan. This is where we see the two sides of the same coin, that will have a symbolic Hunger Games featuring the Capitol's children. Like I said, she's just like Snow. Katniss realizes this, but also realizes an opportunity. Katniss has finally learned how to play the game. Katniss says, yes, Coin, whatever you want, I will agree to. Just let me be the one to assassinate Snow. Coin is overwhelmed, she agrees, and Katniss goes to do her thing with Snow, but she doesn't shoot her arrow to Snow, she shoots it at Coin. Snow later dies due to, honestly, it's kind of ambiguous. Was it the mob? Was it his sickness? Was he choking on laughing? I like to think it was that last one, quite honestly. I think that's a good full circle for him. But essentially, neither of them survived. So now we are at the bleak existence. Katniss is taken away and essentially locked up for like a week, I think. It's a while. Plutarch comes to visit her and grants her a full pardon, and essentially promises her, as long as you go to, your mandated ordered therapy, you can go back to District 12 and live life. Just, you can't come back to the Capitol for a little bit. And he's also thankful that she did take those extreme actions, because I think Plutarch also saw the dangers that Coin had, but I think he found it out too late, and he already put all of his money in the wrong gamble, see? It's a gambling term, I'm sure, that exists there, but he put his money there, and it wasn't the right ticket. So Plutarch, I think, is the true winner of these games, and he says something that's so profound that I think to this day we still need to clock in and remember it. The notes. We are fickle beings with poor memories. I could have memorized that, but it's fine. We are fickle beings with poor memories, and I still think to this day that is one of the most profound quotes from this book. Also, Effie is back. On my first reread, I could have sworn Effie just never returned, and then I came back to it recently, and I was like, oh my gosh, Effie's here. What up, girl? Where have you been? What's been going on? We don't know, but Effie's here, so yay. So Katniss goes back to 12 and people start to trickle back in. People start to rebuild and regrow. Gracie Say moves in essentially with Katniss and becomes her like full-time cook with her granddaughter, and it's really cute because now Katniss has this essential family taking care of her because her mom stayed to help train, and Gale's in District 2. Katniss is helping District 12 rebuild, and they're essentially going through the pile of ashes that is left, taking the bodies they can find and burying them in a mass grave in the meadow. We're going to circle back to that here in a second. So it's also assumed that Peeta's family and Madge's family are both part of the people who perish because we don't see them again. We assume we never see the bodies, but they are presumably buried in the meadow as well. After weeks, finally, Katniss is attending her court-ordered therapy. So happy for her, so proud of her. She needs that in her life, as we all do. Little sidebar, little pro, everyone go to therapy. We love therapy. And Peeta returns. He plants Katniss, and they slowly, over time, grow back together again. And this is where we get, in my personal opinion, the best epilogue of any series I have ever read. I do not think it gets better than this epilogue right here. It's 20 years in the future. Katniss and Peeta have 2 kids. Katniss says it took 15 to 20 years for Peeta to convince her to have kids. So let's assume 15-ish years for the first one, and then 5-ish years to the second one based on the ages they talk about, because one is like a toddler and one's like a toddler and one is like a young child. So let's assume that Katniss is like 37 in the epilogue, if she was 17 at the end of Mockingjay, which means that she was probably around 30 if it took her 15 plus years to convince to have kids. She was 30 when she first had kids. Like, good for you, girl. Normally, I'm not a big fan of pregnancy tropes in books. However, this book is the exception, because the reason Katniss never wanted to have kids is because she didn't feel that she lived in a safe enough place. Katniss is a mom at her core. She cares for the people who couldn't care for themselves. She is basically Prim's mom. She raised Prim by herself. And you see her throughout the books just have this such motherly care towards people who can't defend themselves. You see it with Rue. Heck, you see it with Mags. You see it all throughout when she just steps forward and wants to protect the ones who can't protect themselves. She's a mom. But with the Hunger Games looming over, she knows that she would never be able to protect her child from going into the games. That's why she never wanted to be a mother and never get married. With the games gone and there's safety around, the fact that Katniss finally feels that she's in a safe enough place to have kids of her own, this has to be the best conclusion to any book ever. And to pick up that side note, after this really, really happy thought, we get this really, really sad thought, because they're playing in the meadow in this epilogue, which is the same meadow that essentially all of District 12 is buried in. So her kids are playing on a mass grave, but not just that, they're playing on the grave of essentially their grandparents. Anyway, I'll let you sit with that. But it's a great epilogue. It's the best. And you know, there are worse games to play. Okay, analysis time. Now that you've done the in-depth plot summary and key details you might have missed, we're going to go into the different themes and symbolisms that we've seen throughout Mockingjay. First off is the cost of war. This is definitely by far the most prominent theme of Mockingjay, because we see the cost of war not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. From Katniss's internal monologue and internal battles to even Finnick's and Peeta's completely literally losing himself to the war. This book does not shy away from the brutal consequences of the rebellion. Innocent lives are lost, cities are destroyed, and again, the victors suffer from severe psychological effects. Through Katniss's eyes, we experience and see firsthand how war dehumanizes people. The rebels' tactics become just as ruthless as the Capitol's, and it raises a lot of questions about the morality in the pursuit of victory. Katniss, Peeta, Finnick, Joanna, and many, many other characters suffer from very, very severe PTSD throughout this book and the series. From Katniss's nightmares, Peeta's hijacking, and Finnick's many coping mechanisms like knot tying and noose tying, we see how deeply the games affected our favorite characters. This book does a really powerful job of showing these long-term effects of trauma and the very slow, painful reality of overcoming that trauma and knowing that there's really no fixing it. It's just overcoming and living with it. With propaganda and media manipulation, both the Capitol and the rebels are using propaganda for their own advantage and to control the public perception. Katniss's role as the Mockingjay is very, very carefully organized by District 13, and it's used to inspire rebellion in the districts, and then the Capitol uses Peeta as the exact opposite in hopes to weaken their hold, their control, their manipulation, you name it. This book really explores how the truth can get a little disheveled in war and how symbols can be weaponized for political gain. We see President Snow and President Coin as two sides of the same coin, no pun intended. While Snow rules through fear and oppression, Coin is cold and calculated. Her approach to leadership is very, very stiff, and she reveals her willingness to sacrifice innocent lives for power. This story really suggests that absolute power corrupts absolutely, no matter who wields it. Katniss's choice of assassinating Coin instead of Snow is a really powerful statement to disrupt this cycle of tyranny. Throughout the series, Katniss has been so focused on survival, but in Mockingjay, it's kind of twisted because now it's no longer her story of survival, it's a story of sacrifice. How much can she sacrifice for the greater good? It's no longer just about her. And at the end, Prim's death becomes that ultimate sacrifice. From the very beginning, all of this was initiated. The domino that fell to get all this to happen was Prim picked in the reaping, and Katniss volunteering to prevent her sister's death, just for her sister to die anyway. This highlights the real personal and devastating cost of war. Katniss also really struggles with being this symbol of rebellion. Katniss really struggles with the idea of being turned into this symbol, first by the Capitol and then used by the rebels. Her fight to retain as much as her own voice and make her own decisions drives so much of this narrative. Peeta's hijacking also really ties into this theme of identity and agency, because his very memories and his sense of self have been completely altered, and it forces him to question not only who he is, but what is real and what is not, and what's been manipulated. We've got a couple of key symbols that we've also seen throughout this book that I want to deep dive into just a little bit here. First off, obviously, the Mockingjay, the name of the book. The Mockingjay is the symbol of the rebellion, of hope, and of unintended consequences. The Mockingjay only exists because the Capitol failed to control nature, and Katniss then, of course, becomes the human embodiment of that failure and that defiance. By the end of the book, the Mockingjay really symbolizes and represents this burden of being a figurehead. Katniss's personal pain gets overshadowed by what the Mockingjay means to the rebellion. The Hanging Tree Song is this haunting folk song from who knows when of Katniss's past. Now we do, thanks to Ballad of Songbird and Snakes. It's from Lucy Gray Baird. Thank you, Lucy Gray. But this song symbolizes the idea of death as freedom from oppression. Its reoccurring presence in Katniss's mind throughout the actions and items in this book really comes to help Katniss understand that sometimes there is no clear definition between right and wrong in war. So the silver parachutes that are dropped by the Capitol bombers are also the same silver parachutes that are dropped in the arena as gifts from sponsors. So these silver parachutes were once a sign of hope in the games, and they now become these weapons of death that are used in the Capitol to essentially end the war and also end Prim. This is such a devastating example to show how something that can once bring hope and light can be turned into a weaponized tool against you. Katniss throughout these books has been this girl on fire figure, and fire continues to symbolize both transformation and destruction, and also rebirth. Despite Katniss physically being on fire at the end of Mockingjay. The rebellion itself is a wildfire that is spreading across Panem. But like fire, it also leaves destruction in its wake. But from that destruction, up rises anew a rebirth out of the ashes. Snow's roses really symbolize his order and control that he has over Panem and over Katniss. The scent of roses really becomes associated with fear for Katniss. Every time she sees a rose or smells a rose, she automatically goes into her fight or flight, connecting them with President Snow. And it really represents the psychological hold that Snow has on her throughout the entire book. And Primrose, sweet baby Primrose, she's named after the very, very gentle flower representing innocence. And it's also, the reason that Katniss entered the game in the first place, that started this whole thing in the first place. And her loss signified the innocence that's really lost in war. But I think it's such a full circle that when Peeta comes back to 12 after everything is over, what's the first thing he does but plant Primrose in 12? And now I'm gonna cry. It's fine. It's fine. Everything's fine. I did not mean to get that deep, but here we are. So there's Mockingjay in a nutshell. Deep dive, deep thoughts, really getting analytical here. But I would love to know, is there anything in this little video that surprised you guys? Anything you caught while reading Mockingjay that I didn't talk about, you want to talk about in the comments below? Would love to know. Do you have any theories about anything in Mockingjay that I talked about that you just want to share and let's talk, let's yap? I want to hear all about it. Please drop them in the comments below. I don't have to say this again, but I love, love, love this series. I could talk about Hunger Games trilogy and prequels for days, and I think I literally am. So thank you guys so much for strapping in on this adventure. I forgot my beverage. Okay, I got my bevy. Everything's good. Everything's fine. Well, thank you guys so much for making it to the end of this video. Please like, comment, engage, subscribe. I love doing this content for you guys, and I'm so happy that I feel like recently I've gotten so many new friends here. So hi, new friends. I'm so happy that you're here. Please stay tuned, stay along for the ride. It's gonna be a really fun one. Anything that you guys recommend and want to see from me, also let me know. I'm still just trying a bunch of things out. So we are rocking and we are rolling. I don't know what else to say. Again, I'm so awkward with these endings, but you know what? It's real. I'm real. It's here. I'm here. Yeah, keep in touch. Keep updated. I don't know. I've got a lot of great things coming for you guys. So again, like, comment, subscribe, send this to your besties to keep yapping about the Hunger Games trilogy. Talk to me about Mockingjay. Do you agree that it was the best epilogue of a book series? That is a very hot take. Guys, let me know in the comments below. Do you agree? Am I crazy? Part 2 is correct, but part 1, do you agree? Let me know in the comments below. All right, guys, on that note, have such a, great rest of your day, your night, your evening, your week, whenever you're watching this. Have a great time, and most importantly, happy reading.